Monica Faye Pritchett was born on February 16, 1979 in Anniston, Alabama. She was the daughter of Donald and Dorothy Pritchett and had two sisters as well as two brothers. Monica married Jeremy Rollins, her high school boyfriend, and they stayed in Heflin, Alabama. They had a stable marriage until the birth of their second son, Aaron, for reasons they never made public. The couple decided to live separately. This was despite Monica being pregnant with their third child. Monica and the boys moved into their Sugar Hill Road home in mid-2001. Jeremy Rollins still had visitation rights to visit his two sons every other weekend. Monica loved her children dearly. Dalton was 6 years old and Aaron 2 years old. She was very excited about her third son's arrival in only a few weeks. Monica planned on naming him Shane. She was a busy mom, balancing a full-time job and raising her two sons. She worked at a daycare called Kitty Castle until July 2002, when she accepted a higher-paying job at ITC Deltacom. On Friday, September 13, 2002, Monica and her sons visited her father, Donald Pritchett, after work at his home in Anniston. He had a gift for his oldest grandson, Dalton, and could finally give it to him. The gift was a foal. Dalton named it Mojave. The evening was filled with horseback riding, playing, dinner, and conversation. At 8:30 p.m., Monica and the boys headed back to their Heflin home. They planned to return later that weekend to spend more time with Monica's father and his wife. However, when the weekend passed without any further word from Monica, relatives decided to go check and make sure everything was all right. When they arrived at Monica's mobile home on Monday morning, September 16th, nothing could have prepared them for what they would find. Monica and 6-year-old Dalton had been brutally slayed inside their home. It seemed as if Monica went into labor from shock during the attack. The baby was found partially delivered and not alive anymore. 2-year-old Aaron was found alive and unharmed hiding in a closet. A relative called 911. The same day of the discovery, Jeremy Rollins, Monica's ex-husband, ended his 12-hour shift at Southwire around 6 p.m. and went home. A few hours later, officers arrived at his house and told him what had happened. They asked him to come to the police station. According to officials, Jeremy Rollins was quickly ruled out as a potential suspect and was cooperative throughout the investigation. After being ruled out, Jeremy said how he felt when he learned about what happened to Monica and Dalton. It was unbelievable. There, where I was at, somebody was telling you something that you just cannot believe. Early press reports indicated that Monica and Dalton had both lost their lives due to stab wounds received at some point over the weekend. Everybody pretty much knows everybody when you live in a small town. And with a population of less than 3,500 people, Heflin is one of those towns. When something as horrible as a triple slaying occurs somewhere like Heflin, it rocks the very foundation of the community, especially when the victims were a young pregnant mother, a 6-year-old son, and her unborn son. The crime terrified the community, and people started improving security measures on their homes and kept their kids inside. Family members described Monica as an easygoing, loving mother who was always smiling and good with kids. Debbie Clark, owner and director of Kitty Castles, said, "She was just always smiling, just a good person. Her little boy, he was so precious." Funeral services were held for both Monica and Dalton on September 19, 2002 at Dryden Funeral Home Chapel. They were set to be buried at the Cedar Creek Cemetery, but prior to the burial, investigators decided they needed to collect more DNA for investigative purposes. On September 20, 2002, Governor Siegelman offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person who committed this terrible crime. Very few details about the slaying were made public even years later. The Heflin Police Department kept the details confidential as an investigative technique. They believed that the perpetrator would one day mention something about the slaying that was never made public, leading to an arrest. Captain Joe Neighbors of the Alabama Bureau of Investigation confirmed that DNA, fingerprints, and other evidence had been collected at the scene and were sent to the Alabama Department of Forensic Science for analysis. At the time, the department was facing serious backlog issues due to budget constraints, which created a delay in processing. In June 2014, Heflin Police Chief A.J. Benefield contacted the Attorney General Office's Cold Case Unit, and the two agencies started working together. Based on new information, they began to interview people again. They met with the State Bureau of Investigation and local prosecutors and started new discussions. Police Chief Benefield was an officer at the time of the slayings. He and his partner responded to the 911 call of the relative who found Monica and her son's bodies. When talking about the case in 2014, Benefield had this to say: "So really there were 3 victims. It was the worst crime scene I have ever seen. Not a day goes by that we are not talking about this or working on it in some way. It is very near to our hearts." In 2015, Benefield hinted that they were looking at someone that they have known about since 2002, but he did not elaborate further. In March 2015, the Alabama Attorney General's office joined the investigation. Authorities periodically posted on social media asking for information on the case. Unfortunately, no useful leads came in, and the case went cold for some time. In 2021, the case was reopened by Chief McGlone and Captain Scott Bonner. They resent multiple items to forensic labs, both private and state. They continued to keep close contact with some of the family members and tried their best to provide support as much as they could. Although they could not go into specific details due to the ongoing investigation, Captain Scott Bonner said there was a suspect and evidence. "There is no threat to anyone from the suspect in this case at this time. The suspect, who I cannot name yet, is in jail in another state for unrelated crimes," he said. With help from the state, grant money from Seasons of Justice, and a literal truckload of evidence, investigators were able to make an arrest more than 20 years after the crime. Louis Landon Spivey was arrested on June 26, 2023 and charged with taking the lives of Monica, Dalton, and Shane. On June 30, 2023, Heflin Police Department made the announcement to the public. Louis Spivey kept the sordid secret to himself until he was released from a Florida prison. He is now 39 years old, and was 18 years old when he committed that horrendous crime in 2002. They were acquaintances, Captain Bonner said in a press conference. They had a relationship. Bonner did not reveal a motive or the circumstances leading up to the slayings. For the last 15 years, Louis Spivey has been sitting in a Florida prison cell for an unrelated robbery and aggravated assault case out of Bay County, for which he was sentenced in February 2010. Captain Bonner and Chief McGlone took Louis Spivey into custody after his release from the Florida prison. Captain Bonner explained, "Louis Spivey has since cooperated with the investigation. He was looked at early on in the investigation by other agencies before we opened up the case. Good investigation work gave us some good leads. We did not have surveillance, pictures, or cameras," said Bonner. "We did not have the things that you would have nowadays." When investigators sat down with Louis Spivey, he allegedly gave them a complete confession, outlined the crime, and took sole responsibility for the slayings. A bond hearing was held on June 29, 2023. That determined that the criteria for invoking Anaya's law had been met, leading to Louis Spivey's continued pretrial confinement without the possibility of bond. Anaya's law is a legislation named after Anaya Blanchard, a college student whose life was tragically taken in 2019. The law aims to enhance penalties for certain violent offenses in Alabama. It allows judges to deny bail or parole for individuals charged with certain violent crimes, ensuring that they remain in custody throughout their trial process. The law seeks to prioritize public safety and protect potential victims by keeping individuals considered dangerous off the streets during legal proceedings. Investigators gave few details on what led to the break in the case. But we do know about the confession and that the department was given a grant for DNA analysis and several items were processed by a state lab and private labs in Canada. In a statement on behalf of Mayor Robbie Brown, Chief Ross McGlone offered his condolences to the family of Monica and Dalton. Hopefully this will bring you some sense of closure to this awful chapter in your lives. We would like to extend our deepest gratitude and appreciation to Captain Bonner, the Heflin Police Department, and all the other agencies and individuals who displayed unwavering dedication and determination in their pursuit of justice for Monica, Dalton, and their grieving family. It was definitely the hardest case, and I have worked several similar cases in my career, explained investigator and Captain Scott Bonner. The box of reports and everything we had to go through, that alone took several months. This case proved to become personal to Bonner. He admitted he has probably spent more time with Monica and Dalton's family over the last 3 years than he had with his own. I have become really close to them, he said. It makes me feel great that I can give them some peace. Jeremy Rollins, Monica's ex-husband, remarried in 2011 and has twin daughters with his wife. Aaron Rollins, Monica's second son, graduated high school in 2018 and is now in his early 20s. The family still resides in Heflin. Louis Spivey was transferred to the Cleburne County Jail, where he is now being held without bail and awaiting trial. In June 1994, a 39-year-old victim reported to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in North Carolina that an unknown man had broken into her residence and assaulted her at knife point. Male DNA was collected from her body and tested, but DNA technology was not advanced enough at the time to identify the attacker. Additional testing of the evidence was conducted in 2018. In 2019, the forensic samples from the scene were linked to another assault in Columbia, South Carolina that took place in 2010. In 2022, detectives utilized forensic genetic genealogy to identify a person of interest. Forensic evidence was then sent to Othram. Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive genealogical profile for the unknown man. Their in-house genealogy team used a genetic genealogy search to produce investigative leads that were returned to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Investigators continued working the case, and their follow-up investigative efforts led to the collection of a DNA sample from a person of interest. The DNA profile for this person of interest matched the DNA profiles for the unknown subject that were recovered from the 1994 and 2010 assaults. As a result of years of extensive forensic testing and evidence examination, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's crime lab and cold case unit identified the suspect as James Wayne Ingersoll. He was born on November 6, 1972. In May 2023, members of the police department's Violent Criminal Apprehension Team located and apprehended Ingersoll in Concord, North Carolina. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division and the Columbia Police Department also assisted. The victims have been notified of the arrest. The investigation into this case is active and ongoing. As additional information develops, it will be released by the CMPD's Public Affairs Office. Destiny Renee Pittman was born in Kokomo on January 9, 1992 to parents Melvin Douglas and Carla Pittman McCombs. Destiny was one of 5 children and had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. In 2013, at the age of 21, Destiny was staying with her 2 young children, her boyfriend, a female roommate, and 3 dogs in 815 James Drive, Kokomo. On the evening of February 7, 2013, 2 armed intruders forced their way into Destiny's home. Destiny stepped out from her bedroom into the hallway to confront the intruders. She was then fatally shot by one of the attackers. The bullet went through her chest and struck a wall at the end of the hall. Renee's boyfriend, roommate, children and dogs were at home at the time, but hid away out of fear and were unharmed. At approximately 9:33 p.m., officers from the Kokomo Police Department were dispatched to 815 James Drive when they were notified about shots being fired at the residence. When officers arrived at the crime scene, Destiny was already gone, and there was nothing they could do to revive her. A single .40 caliber shell casing was recovered. Neither her boyfriend, whose name was never disclosed, or roommate, saw the intruders and could thus not give investigators any description. It was suspected that the perpetrators may have been looking to rob Destiny and her boyfriend of marijuana and cash they had from selling weed. Destiny's boyfriend reportedly admitted to police that he sold marijuana and had taken a bag containing weed and over $2,000 in cash to another house just days prior to the home invasion. Both the boyfriend and the roommate also admitted to police that Destiny too was involved in selling, but had not as much since she inherited money. Unfortunately, investigators were unable to identify the attackers, and the case went cold. For more than 10 years, Destiny's case remained unsolved without a single suspect ever being identified. Destiny's demise left her surviving family and friends devastated. Even years after, her mom stayed depressed and cried a lot. "I hope and pray to God someone will have something to say," she said. "My life has turned absolutely upside down. They took my child for no reason. Whoever it was, I hope they are satisfied. They did not get anything out of it. She was just getting ready to start modeling and have a life for herself." Her mother said, not knowing who did this to her daughter or why eats at her each and every day. On March 2, 2023, 2 men were finally identified as suspects in Destiny Pittman's case. Investigators announced the arrest of 32-year-old Joey McCartney and 36-year-old Jesse McCartney. Joey McCartney was taken into custody by U.S. Marshals at the crack of dawn at a residence in Graham, Kentucky. Jesse McCartney was arrested by U.S. Marshals and local police roughly 2 hours later at a residence in Kokomo. Graham and Kokomo are more than a 4-hour drive apart. As a result of the continued investigation since 2013, along with citizens continuing to provide leads, investigators with the Criminal Investigation Section were able to determine that these 2 individuals were responsible for what happened to Destiny. On December 5, 2022, a woman called in and claimed to have information about Destiny's case. She told police she could not keep this information to herself anymore after repeatedly seeing press releases on the case over the years. According to the court documents, this informant claimed to have been with Jesse McCartney on the night Destiny's life was ended, and had been sitting in his white Jeep Cherokee outside Destiny's home. According to the informant, Jesse and Joey said they were running an errand, which the individual reportedly believed meant a deal that involved illegal substances. Jesse reportedly told the informant to stay inside the vehicle, while he proceeded to put on black leather gloves and grabbed his handgun. Joey McCartney met Jesse at Destiny's front door before the pair entered the residence. The 2 of them then started searching the home, which police believe it was for substances that Destiny and her boyfriend were selling. The informant heard a gunshot and saw both men come running out of the house. Jesse was sweating heavily and had a large bag of marijuana and cash in his hand, according to the informant. She alleges that she and Jesse drove back to his apartment and Joey joined them. She said Jesse then made her drive back by the home the next day. When they drove past, there was police tape surrounding the house. The informant also told police about Jesse McCartney changing his phone number and said he still lived in Kokomo on Monroe Street. She said he sold his gun and Jeep 6 months later after the crime was committed. The woman told investigators she did not come forward sooner because she was scared and still is. She had an alleged history with Jesse. Lee showed Destiny's boyfriend photographs of Joey and Jesse McCartney after the new revelations. The boyfriend stated that Joey looked familiar and might have visited before with a common friend. But it was still unclear to investigators whether Destiny knew the McCartneys. The 2 men each faced charges for taking Destiny's life as well as burglary. Jesse McCartney faced additional charges of robbery and possession of illegal substances. The brothers were held without bond for the alleged connection to the case, with their hearing taking place in March 2023. Jesse McCartney's trial took place on August 11, 2023, and he was acquitted of some of the charges against him since it was determined he was not the one that shot Destiny. Joey McCartney's trial is yet to take place. Morgan Bauer was born on April 13, 1996 in Memphis, Tennessee. She was the only child of Sherry Keenan and an unknown father. Morgan grew up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and graduated from Central High School in 2014. She was a pretty girl with blue eyes and brown hair. Morgan had a passion for music and art, and aspired to become a tattoo artist. She had a number of tattoos herself. One of those tattoos was a butterfly that symbolized her freedom and transformation. Her other tattoos were a sun-moon near her right shoulder inside a Celtic design, an anchor with the words, "Whatever you love can be taken away, so live like it's your last day," on her left wrist, a blue and orange jellyfish on her arm from her inner wrist to elbow, and a black tree and flowers on the back of her neck. She also had her ears gauged and her lip pierced twice. Morgan was an avid reader and writer, enjoying books from all different genres. She also wrote poems and stories on her blog. Morgan was a talented dancer and performer and had been dancing since she was 3 years old. She participated in various competitions and shows. She started dating Jose Rodriguez when she turned 18. The 2 of them met online. Morgan also had a dream of becoming a journalist or photographer. She always carried her camera with her. Morgan was active on different social media platforms. She posted photos of herself and her friends, as well as inspirational quotes and memes, especially on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. She had thousands of followers who admired her beauty and personality. Morgan loved to travel and explore new places. She had visited 13 states in the U.S. and had plans to visit more. She decided to leave the small town of Aberdeen in South Dakota and move to Atlanta, Georgia in search of a new independent life. She left on February 12, 2016. Morgan had a pet cat named Luna, whom she adored. She adopted Luna from a shelter and left the cat with her mother when she moved. Morgan had $20 to her name and was expecting a tax refund. She stayed with a man she had met on Craigslist for the first night in Atlanta. Their arrangement included that Morgan clean the house until she managed to find a job. Unfortunately, this agreement did not work out between the two roommates. She then stayed at different hotels. Morgan took a job as a dancer in a Gainesville, Georgia club called the Top of Gainesville. She and her mother were in contact every day or every other day through social media or phone calls. Morgan also remained in contact with friends until February 25, 2016. It was then that she abruptly went silent. On that specific evening, she was dancing at Top of Gainesville. Afterwards, Morgan's coworker, and her coworker's boyfriend all left the club together. They dropped Morgan off at the Citgo gas station in Covington, where she got into a green Eclipse with an unknown driver. That would be the last time Morgan was seen alive. Her mom, Sherry Keenan, became concerned when she could not reach Morgan. She decided to go to Atlanta to find Morgan. Sherry went to the last motel that Morgan was staying in. There she found that all of Morgan's luggage was still in place. This indicated to her that Morgan did not run away. Sherry then talked to Morgan's boyfriend, Jose Rodriguez, to hear if he knew anything about where she could possibly be. Jose told her that he loved Morgan and was worried about her safety as well. He also said that he had not seen her or heard from her. On March 8, 2016, after not hearing from Morgan for over a week, Sherry Keenan reported her daughter as missing to the Atlanta Police Department. According to her cell phone records, officers determined that Morgan's last phone call was made to Jose on February 25, 2016. In Morgan's last Instagram video, she was seen walking in the Yellow River Park in Newton County, Georgia. An unidentified man could be seen walking behind her. Morgan's Instagram was private, but Sherry Keenan said a friend of her daughter sent her a screenshot of Morgan's last post. It showed that it was posted on February 26, 2016, a day after she was seen climbing into the green Eclipse. That meant police were looking in the wrong places based on an incorrect timeline. Investigators tried to identify the man in the video to gather information, but they were unable to do so. Multiple law enforcement agencies got involved in the attempt to locate Morgan. Family members spoke to news outlets to share more information about the missing teen. Her disappearance sparked a massive online search due to the huge following she had. She had moved to the Atlanta area only about 2 weeks before she went missing, leaving nothing but unanswered questions in her absence. Despite investigators' best efforts, they were unable to locate Morgan. They did not know if she left willingly or if foul play was involved. Sherry Keenan said in 2019, "There is not a lot of information out there. Morgan is a cold case, but an active cold case with the Atlanta Police Department." Family and friends held a vigil on February 25, 2023, where they remembered the young woman who went missing. When she was only 19 years old, Sherry Keenan said, "I am not ready to say goodbye until she is found." She organized the Saturday vigil at the Yellow River Park in Newton County. This was the same park as the one where Morgan was last seen. The next update on the case came on July 27, 2023. It was then that police said they had new information which they could not make public. The information had prompted investigators to go back and review the case from the beginning. It then led to a search warrant for a property on 2 South Broad Street in Atlanta. Based on the new information, it was suspected that Morgan's remains might be buried there. Police reported that the current owner of the house cooperated with the investigation and was not considered a suspect. The location of 2 South Broad Street is about a 10-minute walk from the park where Morgan was last seen. Authorities searched both the home and the large area of open property. The Porterdale Police Department, in conjunction with the FBI and the Atlanta Police Department, conducted a one-day search on July 27 to retrieve evidence related to the missing person case. There were several tents set up in a wooded area near large home. Police released videos of FBI agents slowly combing the property in grid formation. Police said after the search that they believe Morgan's life was taken and her body was dumped. Police did not specify what they found that led to this conclusion since they did not find Morgan's body. Sergeant Michael Walden gave feedback and said that their search led to the location of items of evidentiary interest. However, they could not reveal additional information. Morgan's mom, Sherry, had this to say during the search. She added that the last time she saw her baby girl, she gave her something to keep her safe. We did not really talk. I gave her a penny though. I told her to put the penny in her pocket and to keep it with her to keep her safe. She was with a friend, but I do not know who he was. They walked off and that was the last time I ever saw her. Sherry referred to an unknown man that was with Morgan before she left for Atlanta. Sherry suspected the new information and the search of the property would unveil something big in her daughter's case. Casey McClure, who runs an organization that provides outreach to exploited women and has helped in the search since it began, said, "It all goes back to the couple that was last seen with Morgan." McClure also said that the investigators have spoken directly to the couple, acting on a tip. They were identified by officers and were publicly referred to by their last names, Goebel and Warren. McClure said, "Goebel was very sweet and polite and well-mannered and seemed concerned about Morgan. Warren was very rigid." On Saturday, August 5, 2023, the City of Porterdale Police Department posted the following on Facebook. Porterdale police officers obtained arrest warrants and 2 persons have been arrested in this ongoing investigation. Investigators are still actively working on this case, and it is continuing to develop while they are in constant communication with our district attorney and his office. Police Chief Jason Cripps said in the arrest announcement that he was grateful for the help of the other agencies. This was finally a new update in the over 7-year disappearance of Morgan. 27-year-old Jonathan Alexander Warren was arrested in Los Angeles in connection to Morgan's case. He was charged with 4 felonies: taking Morgan's life, hiding that fact, aggravated assault, and tampering with evidence. In accordance with California law, Warren's mugshot was not released. He apparently lived in the area where Morgan was last seen at the time that she disappeared. Warren has a long list of previous offenses. He has charges of fleeing or attempting to elude, driving without headlights in the dark, driving while license is suspended or revoked, and reckless driving. He was 22 years old when he committed these crimes. Most importantly, his address was listed as 2 South Broad Street, Porterdale. This is the same address where the latest search for evidence was done. 27-year-old Caitlin Goebel was arrested in Peoria, Illinois, also in connection to Morgan's case. She was charged with 2 felonies: concealing the fact that she assisted in taking Morgan's life as well as tampering with evidence. She is currently being held in Peoria County Jail. Her mugshot was also not released. The nature of the relationship between Morgan and the couple was not confirmed by police. Newton County District Attorney Randy McGinley said his office is hopeful that Morgan's family will soon see justice. He also said that right now they were still waiting on Warren and Goebel to be extradited back to Newton County, so they can begin to review the case files. "We do not usually have the entire case file until the arrest is made, so we need time to review the case file," McKinley added. On Monday, August 7, 2023, Morgan's mother was not ready to speak on camera about the news of the arrests, but instead posted an update on the massive Missing Morgan Facebook page. Sherry Keenan described Morgan as charismatic, gentle-hearted, beautiful, and funny. She also said that Morgan was her best friend and that she missed her terribly. "What we cannot share is speculation," she wrote. "Please understand, legally and currently, Morgan is still considered a missing person. While we are so grateful that arrests have been made, this is an ongoing investigation." Haxton Gilbert, a friend of Morgan, had this to say after the arrests. "It is a big shock. They were the last two people to be seen with my friend Morgan. I just want to know what happened, you know? They told investigators. They even told her mom. They dropped her off at a gas station. And that is the last they saw of her. The new information that investigators received was an informant that said investigators should take a new look at Warren and Goebel. The evidentiary items found at the couple's home confirmed to investigators that they were responsible for taking Morgan's life. The hope is that the couple will admit to what they did and tell investigators where Morgan's body can be found so that Morgan's family and friends can start the healing process. Eileen Cotter was born in 1952, 3 years after her parents moved from Ireland to England. Her father, Patrick Cotter, was a laborer. In 1967, 15-year-old Eileen found the body of her mother, who sadly took her own life. Eileen left school at 16 and worked at a holiday camp in Berry Island in Wales. Later on, she found work at a care home in Ireland. Just after 2 p.m. on June 1, 1974, a resident at a block of apartments in Hamilton Park, Highbury, North London, saw what she thought was a bundle of rags in the courtyard next to a block of garages. Another resident realized it was a body and asked her father to call the police. When police arrived at the scene, they documented that the female body was lifeless. The body was identified as Eileen Cotter's. She was 22 years old at the time. Eileen was found strangled with her one eye black and bruises on her face and neck. She was lying face down with her lower body exposed and her underwear and tights pulled down. Her handbag, glasses, and shoes were missing. Eileen Cotter's father released a statement detailing his daughter's short life marred by family tragedies after her body was found. A forensic examination was done on her body. A pathologist found that the cause was manual strangulation. DNA samples were recovered from 2 places on Eileen's body. The DNA was used to extract DNA profiles, but unfortunately, no matches could be made at the time. Police interviewed 92 potential suspects and carried out an extensive operation to identify local curb crawlers in their effort to find the attacker. Unfortunately, he was not identified and her case went unsolved. In 2012, 37 years after Eileen's body was found, the investigation was reopened following advances in DNA profiling. The trail went cold for 7 more years until 2019 when John Applegren came to the attention of police for attacking his wife and Smythe Applegren. He lived in the same area as Eileen when the crime was committed. John Applegren is an 80-year-old pensioner who was formerly a mini-cab driver and a bricklayer. He is from South Africa and had previously been married in South Africa to a woman with whom he had 2 children. It is not clear if and Smythe Applegren is his second or third wife, as there are no details of a second wife, although many sources call and his third wife. It was in February 2019 that he was arrested for domestic assault by his then-wife and Applegren. There was a breakthrough when police took Applegren's DNA for the first time. The sample was a 1,000,000,000 probability of a match to the DNA collected from Eileen Cotter's body. When interviewed, he claimed that he did not know Eileen, but accepted he had relations with other women during his marriage. On June 22, 2022, John Applegren was arrested and charged with the slaying of Eileen Cotter. The arrest was made after investigators concluded that Applegren is 100% responsible for what happened to Eileen. Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith said that if someone knocked on his door and arrested him for a crime of almost 50 years ago, he would repeatedly plead his innocence until he could no longer speak. That was not him. He was very calm about it. He had an aura of, dare I say, evilness about him. Applegren appeared at the Bromley Magistrates Court on Thursday, June 23, 2022, where he was remanded into custody. The judge fixed a trial of up to 4 weeks from June 6, 2023. Opening the prosecution's case, prosecutor Alexandra Healy said that DNA samples taken from Eileen's body in 1975 matched those of John Applegren of Brighton Close in Sydenham, southeast London. During the trial, she told jurors that in 2019, Applegren had come to the attention of police for attacking his wife. The court heard Applegren was seen on the night of the slaying in 1975 at a Finsbury Park hot dog stall where Eileen would often go. Miss Healy also told the jury that it appeared Eileen had been pushed out of a car after she and Applegren had intercourse. She described to the court Her body was discovered in the position it fell, without shoes and with her tights and underwear still around her right leg. Appelgren hit Eileen in the face and throttled her before throwing her body out of his car. The defendant was 31 at the time. This happened just 6 weeks after the birth of his first child with his then-wife, and Appelgren told police in 1975 when he was interviewed as a potential suspect that he was living in Layton and never went to the Finsbury Park and Highbury area, which was a lie. Ms. Healy also said, Eileen did not have the defendant's DNA on her underwear and tights because she never pulled them up after they were together. She never pulled them up because she was not alive anymore. During the court case, it was revealed that Eileen and Ed were most definitely not Appelgren's only victims. Appelgren assaulted an 18-year-old female guest at his own wedding to an Appelgren on October 14, 1972. Ms. Healy told jurors the incident only came to light years later when police interviewed an Appelgren as part of the reinvestigation into Eileen's case in 2012. Ms. Healy told jurors that Appelgren had pushed the 18-year-old woman against a wall after she left the toilet at his wedding reception and assaulted her. The victim had not told anyone about the incident, as she was afraid she would be blamed. The teenager told an Appelgren about the assault after the pair later divorced. An Appelgren, mother of 2, also revealed that she had been mistreated, and that Appelgren had once grabbed her neck with both hands. She added that she believed he was cheating on her just months after their 1972 marriage and later found out he was sleeping with her brother's wife. After 11 hours of jury deliberation, Mrs. Justice May announced the jury's final decision. She told Appelgren that putting your hands around a young woman's neck and squeezing hard carried a high risk which ought to have been obvious. The judge added, Eileen must have been terrified. The jury found Appelgren guilty on Friday, June 16, 2023, following a 2-week trial. In addition to being found guilty of manslaughter, he was also convicted of indecent assault. Justice May then sentenced Appelgren to 10 years for manslaughter and a further 6 months for the earlier assault to run consecutively. This means he will be eligible for release on parole after 5 years and 3 months on June 21, 2028, when he is 85 and hopefully worm food. In mitigation, Justin Rouse listed Appelgren's health problems, saying the defendant would be affected significantly by serving his sentence. Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith said, Eileen's life was tragically ended at a young age, with her body then discarded onto the street. When my team reviewed the original investigation, we were impressed by how thorough it was. Investigators at the time used every available method to find the suspect, including operations with decoy women. This was a tactic used at the time where female police officers under protection were placed at the scenes of crimes in efforts to draw out predatory men. Smith continued, unfortunately, they did not have the science available to us now. And although he should have been in prison decades ago, he has now been brought to justice. Investigating violence against women and girls is a priority for the Metropolitan Police, and we will relentlessly pursue predatory men, whether a crime took place decades ago or today. Eileen's half-brother, Patrick Cotter, who was 5 at the time of her demise, said in a statement, I was not only deprived of a sister I had little time to get to know. The knock-on effect also meant I lost my mother who took her own life and my father to mental illness and alcoholism. This was all brought about because John Appelgren took Eileen's life. 3 years after Eileen's strangling, my mother took her own life as the relationship between her and my father broke down significantly. Due to the fighting between them, I was placed in a care home where I suffered abuse until the age of about 11. It was never explained to me why I was placed in care, and I lived most of my childhood believing it is because of something I had done wrong. His statement continues, again, being a young child, I struggled to understand with little explanation given to me. My father drank heavily, but Eileen's demise and the loss of my mother caused him to drink even more, and he was eventually admitted to Springfield's psychiatric hospital. Following this, my father went to live with his brother in Ireland. However, his drinking became too much and he also passed away. According to Patrick Cotter Jr., he has no memory of Eileen's funeral and has no idea whether she was buried or cremated. He also has no idea where she was laid to rest. As a result, he had never been able to visit her grave. Patrick continued, I spent a very unhappy childhood moving amongst various care homes and foster homes. However, when I was 14 years old, I was placed with my foster parents, John and Yvonne. I was very fortunate to be placed in a loving, caring home. They explained various aspects of my life that I did not know or understand, filling in the gaps, so to speak. I also had a half-brother from my mother who was 17 years older than me. However, when I was taken into care, he was told to avoid any contact with me. I felt as though I lost him as well. He was someone I was very fond of and have happy memories of. But this was also taken from me. Patrick Cotter concluded, I would like to see justice for Eileen, whose life was cruelly cut short 49 years ago. As a result of the traumatic event during my childhood, I shut down emotionally. It has made it difficult for me to form close relationships. I only have very faint memories of my sister, but I believe she cared for me. Gretchen Eleanor Harrington was born on June 13, 1967 in the quiet town of Marple Township, Pennsylvania. She was the beloved daughter of Harold Boyd Harrington and Anna Cover Harrington. Gretchen had 3 sisters, Zoe, Anne, and Jessica. The girls grew up in a household filled with love and sibling companionship. Their close bond and support undoubtedly played a crucial role in shaping Gretchen's character and forming cherished memories. Her father, Harold Harrington, was a pastor and dedicated his life to serving various congregations of the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North America. On the morning of August 15, 1975, 8-year-old Gretchen Harrington left her home on 27 Lawrence Road in Bromall, Pennsylvania, with her Bible in one hand. She was on her way to go to summer Bible school camp at the Trinity Church Chapel Christian Reformed Church on 140 Lawrence Road. This was the premises of 2 local churches. Gretchen's father was the pastor of the one church, and David Zanstra was the pastor of the secondary church. She was eager to attend Bible school. Usually, she walked the half-mile with her older sisters, Zoe and Harriet. But on this particular day, though, her mom, Anna, was bringing home her newborn baby, Jessica. Zoe and Harriet preferred to stay home and wait for their arrival. Pastor Harrington encouraged Gretchen to go to Bible school to keep up her perfect attendance record. Therefore, Gretchen was all alone as her father waved goodbye to her. She began her stroll up the hill to the church just after 9 a.m. A child walking alone on a sunny summer day in a place like Marple was hardly unusual. It was not regarded as dangerous or risky. This was the 1970s in a leafy suburb. Kids played various games outside till all hours. They played on the streets, in the dark, and in the woods. They cooled off in Darby Creek, which ran behind Gretchen's home without a care in the world. Kids walked to their friends' houses blocks away. No cell phones or GPS watches to tether them to their parents. Marple was as safe could be. At around 9 to 9:30 a.m., the children arrived at the camp, and the first activity on the agenda was a morning exercise session, led by David Zanstra, the other pastor. At approximately 10 a.m., half of the children were then transported to the Reformed Presbyterian Church for the remainder of the day. Zanstra was one of the people responsible for transporting the children. At 10:30, Gretchen's father became concerned when she had not arrived yet at the second church where he was waiting. Harold began searching Lawrence Road to see if maybe Gretchen had wandered off or went home. When he could not find Gretchen, Harold contacted Zanstra's wife, Margaret, who was at the Trinity Church, to find out if Gretchen was still there and if David Zanstra perhaps knew if she was transported to the other church. Margaret told Harold that her husband returned to Trinity Chapel after transporting children. He was somewhere on the property of the church and had not seen Gretchen that day. The Harringtons and Zanstras knew each other well. The 2 families lived close to one another. Both dads were in the same line of work and both moms filled the stereotypical role of pastor's wife. One of Zanstra's daughters was Gretchen's best friend. When David Zanstra learned that Gretchen's father was looking for her, he called the Marple Township Police Department at Harold Harrington's request and reported Gretchen missing. The call was made at 11:23 a.m. and Zanstra described Gretchen to the police as an 8-year-old girl with blonde hair and pigtails, 3 feet, 6 inches tall, 50 pounds, wearing dark blue shorts with a zipper and snap in the front, pockets on each side of the front, and no visible buttons, and a white top. Quite a detailed description for someone who apparently did not see Gretchen on that day. As the sun set that day just before 8 p.m., there was still no sign of Gretchen. Margaret Zanster brought supper to the Harrington home, where Ina, Gretchen's mother, seemed resigned to the fact that she would never see her daughter alive again. Margaret commented she was just kind of accepting the fact that Gretchen was gone. I do not know whether she was just putting on a brave face. I think she was in shock. Gretchen's disappearance sent shockwaves through Broomall and Marple Township. The people went into full-blown panic mode. By Saturday, hundreds of people were involved in the search for Gretchen. A Pennsylvania State Police helicopter searched the area continuously from above. Friends and family members began handing out flyers to passing motorists in the area. The flyers showed Gretchen in her most recent school photo, sporting a missing tooth and a childish grin. There was a lot of speculation, so many unanswered questions. Had she run away? Did she drown in a creek? Did a stranger kidnap her? Was it somebody she knew? People and church members who searched for little 8-year-old Gretchen said her disappearance destroyed the belief that their community was safe. Karen Frank Zetterberg was a Bible school classmate of Gretchen. They were the same age and lived in the same tightly knit community. After Gretchen's disappearance, Karen's mom took her to the hairdresser to cut her hair real short in order for her to look like a boy. She did not want her daughter to stand out with her long hair. Karen was also not allowed to walk alone to her piano lessons and to the swim club anymore. Paul Barton, who lived in nearby Newton Square, heard about the search on his police scanner while he was relaxing in his backyard pool. He soon drove down to Darby Creek to join a search team. His group combed a grassy hill. Barton recalled, "There was just this very solemn feeling amongst all of us who were out there searching. We went out there not knowing what to expect, what we might find. We were looking for something, anything, but we found nothing. Nobody did." That Sunday, just 2 days after Gretchen's disappearance, police called off the large-scale search operation. Investigators had little to go on. The police chief told a local newspaper, "We haven't got a clue." No useful clues of any kind were found by the search parties. In the weeks that followed, the police spoke with several people to piece together what had happened to Gretchen. On August 17, 1975, the interviews began for the investigation. Witnesses, camp teachers, students, and parents were interviewed by police, providing various important facts for the case. Crucial pieces of information were the observation of either a green station wagon or light-top, dark-bottom Cadillac stopping to talk to a girl near the church. Another fact that was brought up was that the camp's daily routine was broken on August 15th because the group at Trinity Church stayed 45 to 50 minutes longer than usual. The investigation took a turn on August 19th, when a small pair of shorts were found on a fence post in Westchester, Pennsylvania. David Zancher was called in to talk to police based around the fact that he provided such a specific description of Gretchen's shorts, although according to him, he never saw her that day since she never arrived to camp. The shorts found in Westchester ultimately ended up not being Gretchen's. But investigators were still left questioning how Zanstra knew such specific details about her shorts. When investigators interviewed Zanstra on August 19th, he told them that he had picked up some children and driven them to the church the day Gretchen went missing. He still denied having seen her that day. On October 14th, 2 months after Gretchen disappeared, a jogger in Ridley Creek State Park about 20 minutes from Gretchen's home stumbled on human remains. At first, he was not sure what he had found until he saw what was clearly a fingernail. He ran to fetch a park ranger. Gretchen's parents confirmed that the distinctive clothing found with the remains was hers. Ina made the girl's clothes by hand. The remains found were of a small human body, which the autopsy later revealed was indeed Gretchen Harrington's. Dental records were used for identification purposes. Dr. Halbert Feilinger performed the autopsy. He found a cranial cerebral injury and stated that Gretchen had suffered 2 or more blunt impacts to her skull, leaving her with a depressed skull fracture. Police suspected that she had been assaulted as well. Though the autopsy revealed no evidence of that, the heart-wrenching discovery left everyone mourning the loss of a promising young life. The Sunday after Gretchen's body was found, her father Harold delivered a sermon at church. Gretchen, with her simple faith in Christ, is free, he declared. but the perpetrator is in terrible bondage. The world is filled with unspeakable evil, because of the wickedness of the human who knows the truth but will not accept it. The discovery in the woods led to a new frenzy of activity in the case. Witnesses came forward with reports of men of various descriptions they had seen in the area where Gretchen was found. Police received numerous tips, some sounding very promising, some completely frivolous. On October 30th, 1975, David Zanstra was called back to the police station for a further interview about the morning of August 15th. Zanstra told police that he started picking up children for the opening session at 9:10 a.m. and was finished with the pickups and back at Trinity Chapel by 9:30 a.m. He denied ever seeing Gretchen and told police that he was unaware she was even missing, until he was called to the Reformed Church at 11:05 a.m. by Harold Harrington, Gretchen's father. Investigators looked into a series of potential suspects, including several known offenders of assault living in the area. Nothing led to an arrest. What happened to Gretchen became a mystery for decades. No one knew who took her life. The case went cold. Joanna Falcon Sullivan was only 9 years old in 1975 when Gretchen's slaying took place. She was born and stayed in Broomall, Delaware County at the time. The case had always haunted Sullivan. She became a veteran journalist and wrote a true crime book detailing the ongoing investigation in Gretchen's case. Sullivan said, "I had wanted to write this story for decades. I grew up in Broomall. My co-author, Mike Mathis, grew up in Broomall as well. He grew up in Lawrence Park where this happened. It affected both of us as kids, and it affected a lot of kids our age." Sullivan started the book during the pandemic, and Marple's Gretchen Harrington tragedy was released in October 2022. The novel was Sullivan's first book. But she said she does plan to revise this true crime book to reflect any updated information about this case as it unfolds. Naturally, when detectives retire or pass away, other investigators inherit their cold cases. In the case of Gretchen, Sergeant Coffin became the head investigator. When a woman called Marple Police and wanted to talk to somebody about Gretchen, our message went to Coffin's phone. He was sitting at Marple Township Police Headquarters when he heard the voicemail. The woman said she thought she knew who was responsible for what happened to Gretchen and talked about an attempted kidnapping around the same time. She also mentioned that she kept a diary in the 1970s in which she recorded some of this information when she was a 10-year-old girl living in Havertone, about 3 miles east of Marple. The woman still had the diary in her possession after all these years. Sergeant Coffin got in touch with Pennsylvania State Police. Though the case remained open with the Marple cops because Gretchen had last been seen in their jurisdiction, the state police technically became the lead investigatory agency once the remains were found in the state park. Coffin noted, "I have 4 detectives in my division. The state police have so many more resources." State troopers scheduled an interview with the woman. She is designated in court documents only by her initials, SF, and CI number 1, the terminology used for confidential informant. The interview would turn out to be a monumental development in a cold case that had been unsolved for nearly half a century. And monumental developments in decades-old cold cases do not happen that often. The woman told the state troopers on January 2, 2023, that she had been childhood friends with Gretchen and Zoe Harrington, one of Gretchen's sisters. She was also friends with David Zanstra's daughters, Mara and Kristen, and that she would often play at the Zanstra home. She frequently slept over at their house. During one of these sleepovers, when she was 10, she told the troopers she awoke in the middle of the night to find Pastor Zanstra touching her inappropriately. She shifted her position and he immediately hurried from the room. The next night he touched her again, she said. When the girls woke up the following morning, the woman said she mentioned David Zanstra's odd behavior to Mara, his one daughter, and then Mara told her something to the effect of, "Does that sometimes, and sometimes I hear my sister crying in the middle of the night." When the girl related the incidents to her parents, they told her she was not allowed to sleep over at the Zanstra house anymore. Notably, police believe the incident in question occurred exactly 1 week before Gretchen vanished. A short time afterwards, Zanstra's moved to Plano, Texas, a Dallas suburb. The confidential informant also told state police about another child in the neighborhood with whom she was friends, a girl named Holly. According to her, somebody had attempted to kidnap Holly. She wrote the following entry in her diary, which she turned over to the state troopers. In one entry dated September 15, 1975, she wrote, "Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice. It is a secret, so I cannot tell anyone, but I think he might be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z." She confirmed to the troopers that the Z stood for Zanstra. Local police had questioned Zanstra twice back in 1975, along with many other people. Some witnesses had said they saw Gretchen outside a car, talking to someone sitting inside on the morning she disappeared. Some of the descriptions of the car matched one of Zanstra's, but Zanstra always insisted he had not seen Gretchen on the day in question. Bizarrely though, as you the viewer would already have noted, there was an investigatory gap never explained by Marple police. Zanstra was able to give an accurate and detailed description of the homemade shorts Gretchen was wearing that day, even though he supposedly had not seen her. Sadly, the original Marple detective in her case passed away in June of 2020, and therefore there is no explanation for the investigatory gap. In June 2023, state troopers tracked Zanstra down to a lakefront home in Marietta, Georgia. He and his wife had moved there. Zanstra agreed to meet the troopers at the headquarters of the Cobb County Police Department on July 17, 2023. The troopers questioned Zanstra about Gretchen's disappearance, and he denied any involvement. Then they revealed the newest allegations to him that the pastor had assaulted his own daughters and a best friend. David Zanstra then finally came clean to investigators on what really occurred on the morning of August 15, 1975. Jack Stolzheimer, the Delaware County District Attorney, outlined Zanstra's confession about what happened. Once Gretchen was out of her father's view, Zanstra then invited her into his green AMC Rambler station wagon. Instead of driving her to church, he drove her to a secure wooded area, parked the car, and asked her to take off her clothes. She refused and responded that she wanted to go home. He struck Gretchen with his fist, and she began bleeding from her head. After feeling her pulse and her appearing lifeless, he carried her out of the car and attempted to cover her body with sticks. He then left and went on with his day. Due to the nature of the close relationship the Harringtons had with the Zanstras, investigators determined that Zanstra had the means, motive, and opportunity to take Gretchen's life. David Zanstra was taken into custody in Georgia on July 17, 2023. He is currently being held in Cobb County where he has been denied bail. A DNA sample was collected from Zanstra that would be compared to DNA collected in other open cases in Pennsylvania and across the country. Investigators believe that it is unlikely Zanstra is not involved in other crimes considering he worked with children for decades. Phil Stoddard, a detective in Marietta, Georgia, who sat in on the Zanstra interview, told a TV news crew there that Zanstra was emotionless during his confession to the troopers. Trooper Eugene Trey conducted the interview. Afterwards, Trey said, "I do not know if he is sorry for what he did, but this is a weight off his shoulders for sure." On Monday, on July 2023, Delco officials announced the arrest of 83-year-old David Zanstra in connection with Gretchen's kidnapping and slaying. Zanstra was born in May 1940. He was still working as a pastor in Georgia at the time of his arrest. Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer said, "This heinous act left a family and a community forever changed. At long last, I can announce today that David Zanstra had admitted to this crime. Justice has been a long time coming, but we are proud and grateful to finally be able to give the community an answer. We have to realize that most people in this world are good, and that most pastors, especially people who claim to be men of God, are good people. But there have always been people, and there always will be people who are this cold-hearted, remorseless, and just evil. Thank God there is law enforcement here to hold them accountable. And however long this takes, we are going to do it because this young lady should be alive. What happened to her is just horrendous." Stolzheimer added that Zanstra was fighting extradition to Pennsylvania, and that his office was seeking a governor's warrant to bring Zanstra to Delaware County. The district attorney's office will submit a petition for requisition. Once approved, arrangements will be made to have representatives from the Delaware County Sheriff's Office pick up Zanstra and bring him to Pennsylvania. The process could take as long as 2 months. Stolzheimer added, "We are going to try him. We are going to convict him, and he is going to stay in jail for the rest of his life. then he is going to have to find out what the God he professes to believe in holds for those who are this evil to our children. He slayed with his bare hands this poor young girl and then lied about it for 48 years. He ended this girl's life that he knew and who trusted him. And then he acted as if he was a family friend, not only during her burial and funeral, but for years. Chief Graff of the police department in Marple Township said during Monday's press conference, "If you are a praying person, you can certainly pray for Gretchen, and I do not think she needs it. She is in God's hands. You can certainly pray for the evil man responsible for this, because he is going to need it." The charges filed against Zanstra have brought a sense of closure to Brummel, Pennsylvania, which has been haunted by Gretchen's case for nearly 48 years. Gretchen's demise had transformed this community. Pre-August 1975, it was Anytown, USA. Post that day, it changed everything for the kids, for the parents, for the families, for everybody, because nobody could do anything anymore in the innocence that they used to do it before this happened. Jim Cristaldi, who as a youth delivered newspapers to the Harringtons, spoke fondly of a pre-disappearance childhood in which he and his friends would spend countless hours building forts in the woods with only the light of the moon. But right after Gretchen vanished, Cristald, a teenager at the time, found himself in search parties in those same woods looking for Gretchen or anything that might have led to her whereabouts. We were innocent, and this absolutely shattered our innocence. Pennsylvania State Police Lieutenant Jonathan Sunderland said in a statement, "Justice does not have an expiration date. Whether a crime happened 50 years ago or 5 minutes ago, the residents of the Commonwealth can have confidence that law enforcement will not rest until justice is served. This case has been investigated by generations of detectives, and they all are owed a debt of gratitude for never giving up. Particular recognition is due today to Corporal Andrew Martin of the Criminal Investigation Assessment Unit and Missing Persons Unit. His determination to build upon the work of his predecessors and his belief that the case could still be solved have been instrumental in getting us to today's announcement." Michelle Delon, President and CEO of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, said, "Today's announcement is a testament to the power of perseverance and a family and community's commitment to justice. Regardless of how much time has passed, we know answers can be found. As we mark this achievement, we applaud the incredible efforts of the Delaware County District Attorney's Office, the Pennsylvania State Police, the Marple Township Police, and their partner law enforcement agencies, and the Cobb County Police Department for their unwavering dedication in this case. Days like today fuel our ongoing passion to protect children, and we're keeping Gretchen's family in our thoughts, as well as the many other families out there who are still searching for answers." David Zanstra has been charged with taking Gretchen's life in the first, second, and third degree, as well as kidnapping of a minor and the possession of an instrument of crime. The website of the Christian Reformed Church lists Zanstra as a retired minister and said he was ordained on September 20, 1965. In addition to the Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church in Brummel, Zanstra also served at churches in New Jersey, California, and Texas between 1965 and 2005. The Christian Reformed Church said in a statement on Monday that had wanted to extend their condolences to the family of Gretchen Harrington. "We are additionally grieved to hear that a CRC pastor has been arrested in the case. We recognize that we live in a broken and sinful world where violence can happen anywhere by anyone, even within our churches and by leaders we hold to the highest standards." David Zanstra's wife, Margaret Zanstra, did not immediately respond to a request for comment after her husband's arrest. While the Marple community now has most of the answers it had been seeking for all these decades, many of the residents had not found peace in the shocking turn of events. It was much easier to believe that some outsider had done this. Some deranged, itinerant offender who had somehow wandered into town snatched up a young girl and then disappeared just as quickly, taking his evil with him to whatever unfortunate place he landed next. Instead, it was a respected member of their community, a religious leader with a wife and young girls of his own, a wife who had brought supper to the family of the girl he's confessed to slay. Karen Frank Zetterberg, Gretchen's Bible school classmate. Back then, everybody was surprised that Gretchen would get into a car with a stranger. And now to find out that this monster was hiding amongst us in plain sight all the time, it is just sickening. We were always taught in church that evil exists in the world. But you do not really understand evil until something like this happens. We were far too young to learn about evil the way we did. Sullivan, who wrote the book on Gretchen's case, said after the announcement, "I was stunned. The fact that this case is finally, potentially coming to a close, it is very exciting to hear this news. It is still very sad, you know. We cannot change what happened." I interviewed Zanstra, his wife and his daughter when doing research from my book. Zanstra had a murky recollection of the day Gretchen went missing. There was a sense of fear and apprehension in Brummel. I remember seeing a helicopter flying over our neighborhood in a search effort for Gretchen. That image stayed with me for the rest of my life. Sullivan's book was just released last year, and CBS News Philadelphia talked to her about whether she believed it may have led to a break in this case. Sullivan replied, "We started interviewing people. Went to Marple Police Department and were able to comb through the cold case files kept by Chief Brandon Graff, who never gave up on this unsolved case. Marple Police encouraged our research and said that we somehow contributed. I think we got people talking again. Reverend Zanstra took our calls. He answered questions about that day. There's a lot of relief and disbelief that it is actually happening." David Zanstra's neighbors in Georgia also reacted after learning about the charges against him. Karen Alstorf said, "It is shocking. I had no idea. They have just always been very nice people." Aaron Christian said, "Friendly guy. I talked to him a few times. I see him walking around with his cane." The family of Gretchen Harrington released the following statement. "With today's announcement of an arrest, we are extremely hopeful that the person who is responsible for the heinous crime that was committed against our Gretchen will be held accountable. It is difficult to express the emotions that we are feeling as we take one step closer to justice. Gretchen was only 8 years old when she was suddenly taken away from us on her way to church on Friday, August 15, 1975. If you met Gretchen, you were instantly her friend. She exuded kindness to all and was sweet and gentle. Even now, when people share their memories of her, the first thing they talk about is how amazing she was and still is. At just 8 years old, she had a lifelong impact on those around her. The kidnapping and demise of Gretchen has forever altered our family, and we miss her every single day. We are grateful for the continual pursuit of justice by law enforcement, and we want to thank the Pennsylvania State Police for never stopping in their constant search for answers. We would not be here today if it was not for them. As a family, we ask for privacy at this time as we continue to digest this information. Thank you for your understanding, love, and continued support. It means the world to us. Gretchen's parents were married for an impressive 59 years. A father passed away in 2021 at the remarkable age of 94. Officials said Zanstra moved around quite a few times to different churches during his 40-year tenure. He lived in California, Texas, and Georgia. Stolzheimer said, "We want to hold him accountable for everything he did. We need to be diligent. If anyone has any information about that, if David Zanstra ever committed an act against you, please reach out to District Attorney Geoffrey Payne or the Pennsylvania State Police." From what should have been a 10-minute walk down the road turned into a cold case that gripped a whole community for nearly 50 years. Jack Donald Lewis, known to many as Don, was a beloved figure and an influential businessman in the exotic animal industry. His passion for wildlife, particularly big cats, and his entrepreneurial spirit helped him build a thriving business, Wildlife on Easy Street, in Tampa, Florida. He was well regarded for his deep connection to wildlife and his expertise in the care and preservation of exotic animals, particularly tigers and other big cats. His savvy and real estate also played a major role in his success, adding another layer to his already impressive legacy. But on August 18, 1997, Don's life was abruptly interrupted when he mysteriously disappeared. His sudden vanishing sparked a widespread investigation, but over the years, the case remained unsolved, leaving his friends, family, and fans searching for answers. Despite the substantial evidence that came to light, including suspicions surrounding his personal life and business dealings, nothing definitive was found to explain his disappearance. Don's case continues to be a source of intrigue and speculation, particularly with the emergence of new theories and claims in recent years. His disappearance remains one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in Florida's history, and the questions surrounding what happened to him are as unanswered as they were in 1997. As investigators continue to sift through evidence and revisit old leads, the mystery of Don Lewis' fate remains one of the most baffling and unresolved in the world of true crime. In Don's early years as a child, his father abandoned the family and left Don's mother to raise him and his two siblings. While Don's mother did her best to support her children through freelance gigs as a for-hire seamstress and bread baker, her income wasn't quite enough. Thus, to help aid his mother and take care of the family, started working at a young age, forming the foundation to his business ethics. As an adolescent, Don helped out a local mechanic and worked as a farmhand for nearby ranch owners, and successfully graduated from Pasco High School in 1955. When he was only 17 years old, Don married his first wife, known today as Gladys Lewis Cross. Together, the couple had 3 daughters and adopted a son, just as Don continued to expand his economic prowess. He worked countless odd jobs around Florida and eventually settled in the used car business and automotive trade. Slowly but surely, Don built his brand scrapping old machines, selling parts and metal resources while simultaneously investing in real estate opportunities. Don would buy parcels of land to develop and resell, sometimes keeping tracts of land for himself for future business ideas. Before long, Don was a self-made millionaire and the prime example of the American dream in action, starting from nothing and forging his own path to success. Friends and associates of Don would say that no one could tell his success just by looking at him. He always dressed like a normal laborer and kept his public life simple. However, he would keep a $500 bill in his pocket at all times, a symbol of his ability to turn anything he touched into profits, a true green thumb. However, Don's personal life wasn't quite so perfect. It was a well-known fact after his first marriage that he was a womanizer and often found mistresses or second girlfriends to take care of despite having the family back home. One such instance occurred in 1981, when Don met a young woman named Carol Murdoch at the time on Nebraska Avenue in Tampa, Florida. Carol was walking alone at night and crying after struggling with her then-husband, Michael Murdoch. Don asked Carol if she needed a ride, and initially Carol rejected him. However, Don circled around in his truck anyway, even offering the gun in his passenger seat to Carol to use as protection while he drove, explaining that he needed someone to talk to as well. Carol finally agreed, and after conversing with one another for a while, Carol stayed with him that night, and the two fell in love. Of course, this sent shock waves through Don's family, and tensions arose between him and his then-wife, Gladys. Nevertheless, continued his relationship with Carol, who joined his real estate business and helped increase his profits through major land sales. Not long afterwards, Don and Carol's relationship became too serious to ignore, and they divorced their respective spouses and married in 1991. With the excess money from Don's empire, he brought his new cat-loving wife, a bobcat called Windsong, at an auction. The couple then began buying big cats from a breeder in Minnesota who was planning on slaughtering them for the fur trade. As was perhaps in his nature, viewed this as another chance to create a business, and in 1992, founded Wildlife on Easy Street with Carol and what would later become Big Cat Rescue. Carol, however, thought the initiative should be a charity and not just for profit. But Don disagreed, and slowly tensions arose between the two. Over the next few years, Don continued developing Wildlife on easy streets and started buying more animals. In 1995, he bought his first tiger from Dennis Hall, and around the same time was beginning the process of taking his beloved emporium and moving it to Costa Rica, where he'd been buying vast tracts of lands and making connections and associates on the tropical island. At the same time, others began thinking that Don was using Costa Rica as a means to attract women unbeknownst to Carol and escaping away with Costa Rican mistresses. This continued to damage the pair's relationship, and soon it fell beyond repair. In early 1997, Don Lewis began preparing for divorce, gathering his assets together and planning for a future away from Carol. Carol claims that at this same time, he began showing early signs of dementia, his short-term memory declining while digging through dumpsters and collecting junk for seemingly no good reason. Don's lawyer and business associates later said this wasn't proven, and they had never witnessed Don in a worsening state of mind. Regardless, Don's frantic behavior did include a growing fear of Carol, and in June of 1997, He filed a restraining order against her after she verbally threatened to kill him. According to Don, Carol was in possession of multiple guns, but the courts never granted him protection due to her freedoms of speech under the First Amendment, and they felt she posed no true physical harm to him. Don was a worried man, and soon his paranoia was proven correct when at the end of that same summer, the threats, confusion, and anxiety gave way to a tragic mystery. Let us now review the timeline of events that led to the disappearance of Don Lewis. In June of 1997, Don Lewis begins exhibiting signs of paranoia, anxiety, and fear centering around his then-wife Carol Lewis, now known as Carol Baskin. He gives his executive assistant at the time, and the Queen, an envelope containing a restraining order against Carol to be submitted to the local courts. This document contains unnerving quotes by Don, such as, quote, "This is the second time Carol has gotten angry enough to threaten to kill me. Carol got in a big fuss. She ordered me out the house or she would kill me. She has a .45 revolver and she took my .357 and hid it." Later that June, the Florida courts denied protection from the restraining order, saying Carol is no immediate threat and that the First Amendment granting free speech allows her to say such things without consequence. Throughout the summer, Don's erratic behavior continues. He tells his former wife, Gladys, and a couple of their children to stay away from Carol, that he's done with her and planning to divorce her. He speaks his final words to them, saying Carol is one of the worst people and quite dangerous. Not long after this encounter, repeats the same information about his probable divorce to business associate, Wendell Williams. Don signals to Wendell that he is putting most of his possessions in a protective state that would allow him to keep most of what he owned and away from a settlement. Sometime in July of 1997, Don gets together with another friend, Mike McCarthy, tells him that he feels his life is in danger. As July turns to August, Don informs his lawyer, Joseph Fritz, he's in search of another small passenger plane to add to his collection of planes. He finds one he likes, but the aircraft needs work to be able to fly for longer durations of time. At some point during the first 2.5 weeks of that same August, Don has a conversation with his longtime handyman of 15 years, Kenny Farr, while they build a new complex cage for the big cats. Don remarks that he has vague plans of some sorts, plans he never fully explains to Kenny, but is intent on carrying out. At the end of their talk, Don says, quote, "If I can pull this off, it will have been the slickest thing I've ever done in my life." Before Kenny can ask for clarity, Don leaves to attend a phone call and never finishes his thoughts. It would be the last thing Don ever says to Kenny. On Friday, August 15th, Don's assistant and McQueen calls Don regarding paperwork for cars he's preparing to take down to Costa Rica. Despite multiple attempts to reach him by phone and isn't able to make contact, and continues calling throughout that weekend. But she still has no luck. In the evening of August 17th, Don prepares to drive down to Miami and then travel on to Costa Rica. He tells Carol he needs a truck made available for travel by his handyman Kenny, but it's unknown if he ever secures one. That night and into the early morning hours of August 18th, Carol makes her own plans to do chores and run errands for the Big Cat Resort. At around 3 a.m., Carol goes to a shop called Albertsons to buy milk byproduct for the cats. Her car breaks down, but she's saved by her brother, a local sheriff's deputy, who gives her a ride back to her home. Just a few hours later, a little prior to 6 a.m. on August 18th, 1997, Don Lewis leaves his house to make an early delivery of real estate paperwork to his lawyer's main office, and then to travel to Miami and ultimately Costa Rica. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Jack Donald Lewis. Nearly 36 hours pass by, and no one hears from Don, and calls Carol with real concern and suggests they get the authorities involved. Carol agrees, and at about 1:30 p.m. on August 19th, she telephones law enforcement to officially report Don Lewis as a missing person. In the first 24 hours after the missing persons report is filed, police and a few volunteers combed Don's entire 40-acre property in Tampa, Florida, including the wildlife on Easy Street resorts. Despite a thorough search, including aerial support, detectives find no clues or anything to suggest they should continue digging at Don's residence. On August 20th, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office discovers Don's personal van, a 1989 Dodge Ram parked and abandoned at the Pilots Country Airport in Spring Hill, Florida, about 40 miles away from Don's last appearance at his animal sanctuary. Besides the keys to the van and a briefcase full of insignificant documents, nothing of note is found inside the vehicle, and the trail of clues is frozen once again. Over the next 4 to 5 days, detectives travel down to Costa Rica to progress the manhunt. While investigating every nook and cranny possible, law enforcement discovers Don had been engaged in extramarital affairs whilst in Costa Rica. They interview possible connections to Don and those who knew of the businessman, but still find zero leads. The only thing remarkable that investigators learn is that 2 of Don's exotic animals, a pair of ocelots, were shipped out just before Don disappeared, but where they went is still unknown. Initial reports once Don's disappearance reaches national headlines state that they believe Don probably walked away on his own, but as time goes on, both the media and investigators start thinking something more sinister is at play. A few days after the 1-year anniversary of Don's vanishing on August 23, 1998, refuses to take a polygraph test or allow investigators to carry out an intensive search of her wildlife sanctuary or the meat freezers, citing legal advice from her attorney. Later in 1998, Don Lewis' ex-wife, Gladys, and their daughters publicly accuse Carol of being responsible for Don's fate and discarding the body via the exotic animals they own. This is heavily refuted by Carol. In August 2002, on the 5-year and 1-day mark since he first disappeared, Don is declared legally dead by Carol, and his wills are put solely in her possession due to the specific verbiage used in his documents. 9 years later, in 2011, Carol is asked one more time by investigators to undergo a polygraph test. Once again, she refuses this request. Over the next decade, countless conspiracies and folktales are created by curious bystanders of the case and by those with ties to Don, his ex-wife Carol, and their big cat business. However, John Mariscano, the lead homicide detective and spokesman of the investigation for Hillsborough County Sheriff, has shot down any and all gossip in April of 2020, stating that authorities have no prime suspects, no leads, and still no updates regarding the disappearance of Don Lewis. A case just as cold as it had been in that early August morning 23 years before. Not a lot of physical evidence remains in the Don Lewis disappearance, and without a final phone call recording leftover or CCTV footage capturing Don's penultimate movements, there's not much to run with. However, one discovery does provide us at least a hint of what happened to Don before he vanished, even if it does bring more confusion than clarity. The day after Don was reported missing, investigators discovered his 1989 Dodge Ram van discarded at the Pilot Country Airport in Spring Hill, Florida. The airport was about 40 miles, give or take, from Don's personal residence, and initially thought to be where he flew out of that August morning. The troubling thing was that almost nothing was left behind in the van, and the things that were did not preclude a self-made decision to escape. Inside were the van's keys and Don's briefcase full of random papers. Unfortunately, the police did not impound the vehicle right away, leaving it abandoned in that parking lot, allowing for possible tampering and for critical physical evidence to be removed if there was something hidden on the atomic level. When the police did analyze the forensics, they found nothing but normal traces of Don and a second pair of fingerprints belonging to an auto mechanic, Dale Lively. When law enforcement interviewed Dale, he gave proof of a perfectly innocent explanation, stating a few days before the disappearance, Don had swung by the shop and asked Dale to work on the van. During their interaction, Don also asked Dale to come with him to Costa Rica to help on his land, further indicating that Don was fully committed to a southward trip. Dale declined, and the van situation became just another dead end in a case full of questions without answers. Many people associated with the case believe the van is a sign that Don was kidnapped and not a sign that he left on his own accord. Detectives agree, thinking the van was planted at the airport either to simply get rid of it or to make investigators think it was Don's final stop. Regardless, the amount of time it took authorities to analyze the insides of the van for forensics creates a massive what-if in the search for Don, and it is sadly the biggest clue they've received to date. One which may have been regrettably squandered. With the facts of the case understood, now let's turn to the dominant theories in the case of the disappearance of Don Lewis. Like so many cold cases around the world, The disappearance of Don Lewis has been the fodder for some truly outlandish claims and conspiracies, sparked by both family members and those with disdain for Don's former partners. Sadly, these brash and borderline barbaric theories have been glamorized and focused on by one particular documentary series and its ensuing publicity. So we will do our best to dissect each theory with clarity and reasoning backed by evidence to properly respect the facts of the case and the man who went missing. It's our belief that truth and respect to the facts of the case should always take precedence, and it is insulting to Don Lewis's memory and potentially damaging to his case to sacrifice these in the pursuit of an overdramatized quote-unquote good story. The first real theory purported by those involved with Don Lewis's personal life came from his daughters and his first ex-wife, Gladys Lewis Cross, in 1998, only 1 year after Don went missing. They made a public interview in People magazine, theorizing that Carol Baskin had indeed killed Don, and then disposed of his body via a meat grinder, and then feeding it to her tigers at the Big Cat Rescue Sanctuary. Daughters felt the police didn't do a thorough enough job searching the property and should have carried out forensic analysis on Carol's meat grinder, testing it for Don's DNA. Carol has vehemently denied such possibilities, claiming the meat grinder in question was too small to even handle something like a human hand, let alone an entire full-grown adult male body. Not only this, but what many people fail to realize and what one documentary fails to make widely known is that the meat grinder in question was removed from the Big Cat Rescue weeks before Don went missing, confirmed by the sheriff's office investigating Don's case. And if Carol did try to use a corpse as food for her big cats, there's absolutely no way bones and forensic evidence would not be left behind. The acidity of a tiger's stomach is strong, but not strong enough to completely destroy human remains. There would be a significant amount of bones, blood, and tissue left over, and to try to clean up every bit of the leftovers and leave absolutely no hints of the act is too far-fetched to believe. Such a vile act, even if utilized, would leave behind too much evidence, and investigators certainly would have picked up on something. Nevertheless, these outlandish claims have only picked up steam when notorious big cat collector and nemesis of Carol Baskin, Joe Exotic, created an obscene music video flaunting the tiger-feeding hypothesis. But that wasn't his only crazy claim. Joe Exotic became obsessed with another theory that while Carol was still responsible for her husband's disappearance, she actually hid his body under the ground at Big Cat Rescue, digging up the dirt where her septic tank rested, and putting Don's body in that, covering it up, and pretending as if nothing had happened. Joe made many public pleas for investigators to excavate the earth around the property and check the septic tank. And this idea spread around his own exotic zoo where employees began believing that same conclusion. However, the documentaries covering Joe and his theories also failed to share the information that debunks his theory as well. The septic tank in question, in a similar vein to the meat grinder, was not installed on the Big Cat Rescue Sanctuary until multiple years after Don went missing. If Don was buried somewhere on the property, it was nowhere near the septic tank. In addition, it makes little sense for Carol to bury Don on her own property, where future digs and construction work will almost assuredly take place and risk discovery. Now, all this being said, to completely remove Carol Baskin as a suspect would be premature. While she has consistently denied any involvement, there are pieces to her past that might suggest a motive, or at least further consideration. The major piece of the case that might preclude motivation for Carol is Don's promiscuity and overall stance on the wildlife projects he and Carol had created. It is well known that Don saw the tigers and various big cats as nothing more than a business, and thought of it as a means to make money rather than any real charity. While they were initially together in that viewpoint, eventually wanted the sanctuary to be exactly that, a place where rescued cats could live approved by fellow activists, saving them from immoral breeding and cub abuse. This requires a lot of money, and Carol had Don to fall back on. Some in Don's inner circle said he hated losing his money to her spending, and that being a millionaire married to someone without much money is a treacherous combination. But we mustn't pretend that Don was perfect either. He was also involved in various extramarital affairs, having multiple girlfriends despite his marriage to including a secret mistress down in Costa Rica. With a clashing philosophy and a dying marriage, Carol may have sought to end what was becoming a toxic situation. In fact, pages from her personal diaries exposed by various sources found entries written by Carol stating things such as, "I wish there was some way out of her relationship with Don. not to mention her verbal threats. Eventually, her wish was granted, and most suspiciously of all, Carol Baskin did end up the biggest beneficiary of Don's vanishing. Not long after he went missing, Carol cut off all the utilities to Don's office, took out his wills and powers of attorney, and held onto them until the very first date she was allowed to declare him legally dead. The 5-year and 1-day anniversary of his disappearance. Even stranger was that when the powers of attorney were read, lawyers found that a special clause had been written granting Carol head of Don's estates, not after his death, but specifically after his disappearance. Multiple lawyers have said this is an irregular clause for such legal documents, as people rarely expect to disappear. Not only that, but Carol ended up inheriting 90% of Don's worth, leaving just 10% behind for Don's former family. Now it should be stated that Don had instructed Carol to leave them with 0%, that she decided to help them regardless, citing their blood relationship to Don as meaningful. Does the strange disappearance clause in Don's will, combined with his infidelity and strict business-minded pursuits, make Carol the killer? No. But it does raise suspicion in her motivations, as $1 million were at stake to keep her dream of saving big cats alive. Some have pointed out that just because she had Don legally declared dead the first day possible doesn't mean she was the mastermind either. And they have a point. Wouldn't it be ridiculously obvious to carry out such a suspicious legal action? If Carol was indeed at fault, drawing attention to the matter wouldn't be her priority. It's also possible that she wasn't the killer, but rather had blood on her hands, arranging for someone else to handle Don. It is undoubtedly deeply suspicious. There are many people afraid of Carol, including Don himself, but fear, circumstantial evidence, and speculation unfortunately does not mean the party is guilty without physical evidence. Of course, Carol Baskin isn't the only one subject to theories of involvement. In fact, many people wonder if Don wasn't involved with anything malicious or any third party at all, but rather left on his own accord or died trying to do so. With his vast resources and $1 million, Don certainly had the capital necessary to pull off a stunt and escape his previous life. Perhaps he was done with the big cat operation and the hassle of dealing with such a consuming business. Perhaps his affairs with women were catching up with him and he wanted to start over. Or perhaps he was truly fearful of Carol, and set up his estates so she would profit over his disappearance while he got to start over on the far side of the world. These theorists believe Don faked a kidnapping, fully intending to fly out of Miami that August morning and never return. He could have put his van in a different airport parking lot to throw police off his trail, hopped on another flight, and vanished in the blink of an eye. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Don had money outside of his known estate or was saving up for this exact scenario. Don was full of secrets and constantly plotting his next move, preparing for the future better than most. In fact, Don's personal handyman, Kenny Farr, told reporters he knew Don would bury money in gold bars around his various properties and was probably worth around $20 million, $15 million more than his lawyers thought. Remember that Kenny was the person Don told, quote, "If I can pull this off, it will be the slickest thing I've ever done in my life." Could it have been a great escape plan? Many think it to be possible, but not Kenny. He doesn't understand why Don would leave a van at an airport at all, even if it wasn't the right one. It would be too big a clue that Don was running away and make it much harder to become invisible. Both Don's lawyer, Joseph Fritz, and lead investigator of Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, John Marcicano, agree, saying Don was more likely to have been killed. The other arguments that Don left on his own will, but perished unexpectedly, is also heavily gossiped. Some followers of the case, including Carol Baskin herself, think that Don may have got into one of his planes to fly to Costa Rica, but crashed somewhere in the ocean. There is, however, a lot of evidence to suggest this is false. Detective Marciano points to the lack of flight records going to Costa Rica that day and the lack of crash reports in the area for the same timeline. Theorists then report that Don was a known illegal flyer, having lost his pilot's license, but choosing to fly anyway, operating his planes low and under radar detection. Yet again, Detective Marciano refutes these claims, saying every plane Don owned was far too small to make the trip to Costa Rica in one go. If Don did get in a plane and attempt to travel south, it would have been desperate and unsafe, possibly hinting at a deteriorating state of mind that some have claimed that Don was suffering from before he disappeared. As previously noted, Don was experiencing symptoms of onset dementia and may have been overcome with fatigue, paranoia, or a combination of the two. This would explain his ramblings to his friends about being in fear for his life and constantly looking over his shoulder, conspiring against his then-wife, Carol. The problem with this theory, though, is that if Don was truly dealing with memory loss and dementia, he would not be able to successfully vanish without a trace so easily. If his mental faculties were becoming compromised, surely he would have made a mistake somewhere. Plus, a lot of close associates to Don don't believe the dementia stories anyway, saying he was of sound mind and honestly genuinely terrified for his life. So if it doesn't appear that Carol killed Don, and it wasn't Don who left by choice, who was responsible for his disappearance? A few people think Joe Exotic was actually the one to blame, wondering if he may have taken Don out to spite Carol and derailed the future of wildlife on Easy Street, claiming the validity in such a conspiracy, knowing John was guilty of other plots against Carol's life. However, it should be noted that Joe and Carol's bitter rivalry did not exist in 1997, and no such evidence supports this idea. A few others point to militant animal rights activists or think that Don had connections to drug lords in South America that wanted him dead. Regardless, the fact of the matter is the police have no hard evidence and have no prime suspects in their sights. Anyone could be at fault, and that's what makes Don Lewis' disappearance all the more tragic. Before we divulge our hypothesis of Don Lewis' unsolved disappearance, we want to make it known that our conclusions are purely logical speculation based on evidence, circumstance, and factual subtext. We are only privy to the same information presented in each video, and we do not promise certainty or an expert guarantee on the findings we reach in closing. We simply observe, research, and report. In the case of Don Lewis, we believe he was kidnapped, murdered, or a combination of the two. So many of the people involved with Don in his life, such as business associates, family members, his personal lawyer, and the lead investigators looking for him, believe the same to be true, that somebody or somebody's wanted Don dead, whether it be for vengeance, spite, or pure malice. The tricky part of the equation is who. Without a doubt, Don Lewis's killer was both close to him and had the resources to carry out a seamless homicide. The perpetrator had to be close to Don to know of his planned trips to Costa Rica and multiple projects down there, and be able to use that as a blind for investigators, tricking people into thinking he disappeared purposefully. Now, this doesn't necessarily trim down the list of suspects because Don had a lot of friends and a lot of enemies, each of whom knew of his Costa Rica paradise. Yet it does signal the killer was smart and knew how to arrange a multifaceted kidnapping. In addition to smarts, the killer had to have the money to hire someone to get rid of Don or to do it themselves without ever leaving so much as a hair follicle. In the case of a multimillionaire like Don was, removing them from the face of the earth is going to take a pretty penny. So how did they do it? A lot is left to be desired in the investigation in terms of clues and concrete timelines, but if the killer was an associate to Don, they probably had secretly arranged a meeting early that August 18th morning with him. He was already out to make a delivery and head to Miami for a flight. So the arrangement was probably just another stop. It was here they likely kidnapped him, drove his van to the airport as a fake out, and disposed of him elsewhere. There's also the idea that Don could be meeting someone with his own planes, and when they took off, he was pushed out over the ocean by his murderer, a theory brought up by his lawyer. Whatever the method was, it ended with a clean getaway. Could it have been Carol Baskin? It is entirely possible. In addition to the theories mentioned previously, Carol's own family had a disdain for Don. And speaking of her family, she also had a brother as a deputy in the sheriff's office, who was one of the last people to be around Don right before he went missing. Plenty of people have come forward to quickly strike down theories of collusion in law enforcement, or any involvement from Carol's brother, citing their weak relationship to begin with. Both Carol and Ann McQueen, the assistant who probably knew Don Lewis better than he knew himself, were intensely vetted by detectives, cleared of any wrongdoing, and never labeled as prime suspects. It doesn't rule them out completely, but it does give credence to the fact there is simply no lead at the forefront of the investigation. It's important to remember that at the center of the entire case is a man whose fate is unknown, the humanity and tragedy of which is sometimes obscured by the glorification of conspiracy theories and internet jokes. There are loved ones and friends of Don Lewis who are desperate for answers and longing to know what happened to him, but instead of receiving real help, They have to wake up every day to see his face and name abused by people looking to profit off his mystery and laughing at the idea that he was fed to tigers. It is so important to remember that the people in these cases were people, real people who deserve respect and justice. And the abuse of their stories to make shocking headlines and quick money is insidious. Was Don Lewis a perfect man? No, by no stretch of the imagination. He, like all of us, had his issues and shortcomings. But at the end of the day, Don Lewis was a real person with a beating heart and deserved to live out the rest of his days. No matter how badly someone didn't like him or the businesses he involved himself with. Because of the tone and reception of certain documentaries made since Don disappeared, it is hard to get people to focus on finding answers rather than supporting the nonsense. So it is up to all of us to work to progress above the overly dramatized conspiracy theories, looking to shock viewers and readers to earn quick money and humanize Jack Donald Lewis and respect his case. If you or anyone you know has any information that could assist investigators in the search for Jack Donald Lewis, please contact the relevant authorities. No detail is too small or insignificant, as it could hold the key to unraveling the chilling mystery of Don Lewis and the legacy he left behind at Wildlife on Easy Street. Linda Hazard. In the 19th century, alternative medicines were often marketed as miracle cures for a wide range of ailments, despite their dangerous properties. Strychnine was sold as an athletic performance booster, heroin was given to children as a remedy, and cocaine was recommended for treating alcoholism, with Sigmund Freud even endorsing its medical uses. These substances were widely available in various forms, including powders, wines, and soft drinks. Thankfully, by 2023, medicine has advanced significantly, prioritizing safety and scientific evidence in its treatments. But back then, science was not so advanced, and the general public didn't have access to information the way we do today. As a result, they were often misinformed and relied on those who sold themselves as doctors. One of the most nightmarish figures of the late 19th, early 20th century, who masqueraded as a health professional, was a woman by the name of Linda Hazard. Hazard was born Linda Lauren Burfield on December 18, 1867 in the small city of Carver, nestled along the banks of the Minnesota River. While today the city has almost 6,000 residents, back in the 1860s, it had a population of just over 700 people. Hazard was the oldest child born to Suzanne and Neil in Montgomery, Burfield, and had 6 siblings. At the age of 18, she married and went on to give birth to 2 children. But in 1898, she left her family behind to return to Minnesota, where she pursued a medical career. Hazard never attended university and never acquired a medical degree. But she managed to nab a medical license for herself in the state of Washington by exploiting a loophole that saw alternative medicine practitioners being exempt from more modern regulations. Hazard was a staunch believer in therapeutic fasting. According to her book, The Science of Fasting, she spent a great deal of time studying under Edward Hooker, a doctor who advocated for fasting and invented the no-breakfast plan, wherein he argued that people should only consume 2 meals a day and they should give up breakfast, claiming that disease and physiological problems were the result of excessive eating. He believed fasting could even cure mental health issues. However, many doctors disagreed with Dewey's takes. In 1910, the British Medical Journal described him as not an accurate or careful writer, as he had written many medical errors throughout his books. They also labeled his claims that fasting was a cure-all for disease as a foolish delusion. Other doctors noted that fasting should only be carried out under medical supervision. Hazard, however, was uninterested in the criticism levied against her mentor. She developed her own fasting method that she claimed was a remedy for all sorts of illnesses. Using her technique, one could supposedly rid themselves of toxins which caused imbalances in the body. In 198, aged 41, she published her first book, Fasting for the Cure of Disease. And 9 years later, she released her second, Diet and Disease and Systematic Cleansing. In 1927, her first publication was re-released using the title Scientific Fasting, The Ancient and Modern Key to Health. In her books, Hazard wrote that the cause of all illness lay in food, something she picked up from her mentor. She stated, appetite is craving. Hunger is desire. Craving is never satisfied, but desire is relieved when want is supplied. She believed that the path to good health and long life was to let the digestive system rest by fasting. Despite both Hazard and Dewey receiving disapproval from the wider medical community, the public found the concept of fasting interesting, and it was seen as trendy to partake in it. The success of Hazard's written work helped her to establish a specialized hospital called Wilderness Heights in Olalla, Washington. Inside the walls of Wilderness Heights, inpatients fasted for days, weeks, and even months. Their diets consisted of tiny portions of various fruit and vegetable juices and broths. What they were eating was unsurprisingly nowhere near enough to sustain them, especially since the broth often consisted of a tomato placed in hot water and then removed before the broth was served to patients. While some patients survived their trip to the hospital and would then publicly endorse Hazard's methods, many died while in her care. In defense of her techniques, Hazard would tell people that those who died had succumbed to a separate undiagnosed illness such as cancer or cirrhosis of the liver. Local residents began referring to the hospital as Starvation Heights because the hungry, frail, and skeletal patients could be seen wandering around looking for food and help. Furthermore, Hazard was known to steal the belongings of her patients after death and often had them sign over their estates before their demise. It is believed that Hazard killed her first patient in 1902, long before she published her first book. The patient's post-mortem showed they had died from starvation, and the local coroner attempted to have Hazard prosecuted. Bizarrely, however, because she wasn't licensed to practice medicine, she was not able to be held accountable for her actions. She was reportedly vague when asked about the patient's missing jewelry. Just as her divorce was finalized, Hazard met Samuel Christman Hazard. A former military man, Samuel had ruined his career in the army by misappropriating army funds. He was often described as a drunk, a leck, and a swindler, making him a good match for Hazard in her callous ways. After they married, Samuel spent 2 years in prison as he'd failed to divorce at least one of his wives. One of Hazard's earliest patients was a woman named Gertrude Young. Gertrude had been looking for a cure after she'd been left partially paralyzed following a stroke. She had been left without the function of one leg and one arm. Hazard convinced Gertrude that she had a remedy, promising that a 40-day fast would bring back her mobility. Gertrude was clearly desperate and willing to try anything to regain what she'd lost post-paralysis, agreed to the fast and began treatment. A friend accompanied the woman to the hospital and stayed with her, as she was instructed each day by Hazard or her nurses. Gertrude was not allowed to eat food, but could consume small amounts of liquid, often consisting of tomato broth or strained orange juice. 30 days into Gertrude's 40-day fast, she was found shaking, sweating, and throwing up what is described as a thick, dark substance. Although it was winter and the temperature was biting outside, Hazard had the windows to the room open. She insisted her patient needed fresh air, but it seems to make Gertrude all the more ill. Gertrude's companion called her usual doctor, the one who had helped her manage since becoming paralyzed. The doctor explained that Hazard's alleged cure was never going to work and that Gertrude needed to stop fasting immediately. Despite this, however, Gertrude refused to listen to her doctor. Hazard had been so convincing that Gertrude was sure she would be cured if she could just make it another 10 days. But Gertrude Jung did not make it. She died on day 39. Hazard, however, was not charged with murder or even manslaughter, as Gertrude was seen to have made the decision to continue with the fast herself, since she had opted not to listen to her doctor's advice. Hazard was not intimidated either. She continued to treat patients at her establishment in the exact same way, completely unfazed by her brush with the law. On March 28, 1910, Earl Edward Erdman, a civil engineer based in Seattle, died from starvation in the Seattle General Hospital. Notably, he'd kept a diary of his time at Wilderness Heights, and he'd written down the details of Hazard's methods during the weeks he was in her care. Beginning February 1st and spanning the entire month, Earl ate less than one meal a day. On his very first day at the hospital, his dinner and supper each consisted of mashed soup dinner. 5 days later, he had the same, this time with 1 orange for breakfast. 2 weeks into his treatment, he had only 2 oranges for breakfast and no dinner or any supper. Over the next few days, he was given 1 cup of soup per day. Around February 16th, Rowe noted, "Slept better last night. Had quite dizzy, eyes yellow-streaked and red." 5 days later, He detailed that he was suffering from backache just below his ribs and slept poorly that night. By the end of February, he mentioned having a kind of frontal headache, pain in his right side below his ribs and pain below his ribs in his back. His diet, generally consisting of tomato broth, oranges and strained orange juice, never changed up to his hospitalization on March 28. Two other patients of Hazard were wealthy heiresses with property in the U.S., Canada, and Australia. Claire and Dorothy Williamson had been orphaned as children and both dealt with hypochondria, often spending large sums of cash for medical care they didn't really need. At the time of the sisters' arrival, though, Wilderness Heights was not finished being built. As a result, they were treated in an apartment in Seattle, Washington. Their treatment was somehow even more grotesque than that of Gertrude Young. The two women were starved, beaten, and subjected to needless hours-long enemas. Nurses would later state that as a part of the inpatient's treatment plans, they were to undergo massages, but that these massages often sounded more like violent physical assaults. The two sisters eventually became so frail that they struggled to walk. Neighbors in the apartment complex recalled hearing them crying and screaming. Hazard knew that they were becoming aware that something odd was going on in the apartments, so she ended up placing them on gurneys and having them move from the building to her unfinished hospital in Alala. The two women had been starved so greatly, they had become delirious. Hazard, though, as cold and callous as she was, decided that this was the perfect opportunity to make herself an extraordinarily wealthy woman. Writing new wills for the sisters, Hazard appointed herself as both their legal guardian and the beneficiary of their estate, valued at over $500,000 furthermore. She stole the pair's jewelry and valuables estimated to be worth around $6,000, wore their clothes, and stopped the two from being able to see and speak with each other. It is unclear how, but word emerged that the two were in trouble when Dorothy managed to contact the sisters' previous governess. The governess, though, was based in England, although some sources state it was Australia. And by the time she arrived in Washington, Claire had already passed away. She had weighed less than a 50-pound at the time of her death. Hazard attempted to shift the blame, claiming that drugs administered to Claire as a child had caused her internal organs to shrink and led to corrosive of the liver. The governess was aghast when she saw the body and noted that Dorothy looked close to death herself. She eventually had the remaining sister removed from Hazard's care after some struggle. She would have to contact one of the sister's uncles, a wealthy man named John Herbert who lived in Portland, Oregon, to initiate the move. After haggling with Hazard, John paid almost $1,000 for the release of his niece. After securing Dorothy's safety, he turned to Lucien Agassiz, the British vice-consul in Tacoma, and together they began to look into Hazard. They discovered she was connected with the deaths of numerous wealthy individuals, and many of these high society members had signed their riches over before their deaths. One such victim was an Englishman named John Ivan Flux. He'd come to the U.S. to buy a ranch, and yet, when he died in Hazard's care, he had only $70 to his name. Furthermore, a New Zealander named Eugene Wacklin reportedly shot himself while he was an inpatient at Wilderness Heights. Before his death, Hazard had managed to become the administrator of his estate and drained all his money. On August 15, 1911, Kitsap County law enforcement arrested Hazard for the first-degree murder of Claire Williamson. Her trial began in January of 1912, and facility employees, including nurses, testified against Hazard, noting that the sisters endured scorching baths and frequently suffered through enormous pain at the hands of Hazard, who had been dubbed the starvation doctor. During the trial, the public was also made aware of Hazard's tendency to financially drain all of her victims. The prosecution called it financial starvation. The doctor showed no remorse or regrets and took no responsibility for Claire's demise. In her first book, Hazard wrote, "Death in the fast never results from deprivation of food, but is the inevitable consequence of vitality sapped to the last degree by organic imperfection." And she stuck by that even while on trial for murder. She claimed she was being attacked because she was a successful woman and because she practiced unconventional medicine that traditional doctors disapproved of. Still, the jury did not believe much of what Hazard had to say at her trial. After briefly deliberating, she was found guilty of manslaughter and was ultimately sentenced to between 2 to 20 years in prison. Additionally, her medical license was revoked. She spent her brief stint behind bars at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla serving just 2 years before being released on parole on December 26, 1915. The following year, Governor Ernest Lister incredibly gave Hazard a full pardon, though her medical license was never reinstated. Accompanied by her husband, Hazard left the U.S. and moved to New Zealand, where she continued to work as a dietitian and alternative medical practitioner. However, in 1917, a local newspaper revealed that Hazard's medical license only allowed her to practice in Washington. As she used the title doctor, she was subsequently charged in Auckland for practicing medicine while not registered to do so. She was found around $600 New Zealand dollars for this crime. 3 years later, though, Hazard returned to Alala. She opened a new facility here, but this time, she called it a school of health as her medical license had been revoked. Despite its name change, the establishment essentially operated in the same way that Wilderness Heights did, and Hazard continued to oversee fasts until the facility burned to the ground in 1935. It was never rebuilt. Although Linda Hazard was only ever charged with 1 case of manslaughter, she is often seen today as a serial killer due to the numerous patients who perished while under her care adhering to the supposed treatment plan she had laid out for them. Between 1908 and 1912, Hazard is believed to have caused the deaths of at least 16 people, including Earl Erdman and Claire Williamson, following her controversial advice. Rader, reportedly the original owner of the land where Hazard's Wilderness Heights facility was established, may have been linked to the deaths, though it's possible Hazard was responsible for many more. Ironically, Hazard herself died at the age of 70 on June 24, 1938, after attempting to cure an illness through fasting. Tragically, she passed away from starvation, just as many of her patients had. Patricia Viola, a 42-year-old housewife and mother of 2, lived in Bogota, New Jersey, with her husband, James, and their children, Christine and Michael. Patricia was renowned for her dedication to making special occasions memorable for her family. She put a lot of effort into creating elaborate homemade cakes and personalized gifts, and even volunteered as a librarian at her son's school. Her caring nature and attention to detail made her well-loved by friends and family. However, Patricia's life took a dark turn when she disappeared under strange circumstances. In the days leading up to her disappearance, there were unsettling events, including an ominous request from a friend, an unusual confrontation, and a burglar alarm being tripped at her home. Patricia's remains were later found 45 miles away, leaving many questions about how she ended up on that beach and what truly happened to her. Patricia was known for her kindness, always going the extra mile to make holidays special with homemade cakes and personalized gifts. She dedicated her time as a volunteer librarian at her son's school and was deeply loved by friends and family for her generosity and nurturing nature. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Patricia had been under significant stress, having spent countless hours caring for her sick mother-in-law and assisting her sister-in-law, Dana, who was staying with the family after going through a difficult breakup. Despite her selflessness and devotion to others, this period of added responsibility weighed heavily on her. She evidently held herself to high expectations, said one family member, and the people in her life had come to expect her for going above and beyond. Patricia had epilepsy and normally carried her medication with her at all times. Roughly 3 months prior to her disappearance in November of 2000, Patricia experienced a grand mal seizure. Following this, her driver's license was suspended for 90 days at the recommendation of her doctor. This was hugely limiting to Patricia's independence and mobility and reportedly impacted her morale heavily. She could no longer easily do the things she loved, such as going to the mall alone to buy presents for her family, which she expressed sadness about during the Christmas season. Additionally, it made family obligations even more difficult. For instance, Patricia having to travel across town to check on her mother-in-law in the hospital became all the more stressful and time-consuming. In the weeks prior to her disappearance, the stress in Patricia's life continued to several events were weighing on her heavily and gave loved ones reason to worry. On February 6, 1 week prior to Patricia going missing, Patricia received upsetting news. Her doctor was recommending another 90-day suspension of her driving privileges, extending her time without a license until at least late spring. Patricia was reportedly incredibly depressed by this news. Tensions between Patricia and Donna, her sister-in-law, were continuing to build following issues that arose from Donna staying at the Viola household. Donna was a smoker and Patricia was not. She did not approve of Donna smoking in the house and had so far been unable to convince her to stop. The typically level-headed and non-confrontational Patricia had been managing the effects of Donna's indoor smoking instead by cleaning, vacuuming, and airing out Donna's room on a daily basis. The day before she went missing, Patricia discovered that Donna had burned a hole in the guest bedspread, a move that could have started a fire and put the entire family in danger. Although Patricia was upset, she and her husband decided to wait to address it with Donna until the following day. On February 12, 2001, the night before Patricia's disappearance, she and Jim attended a party in Brooklyn, New York at the home of Patricia's best friend and close confidant, Twynette Fizio Markowitz. When Patricia arrived at the party, Twynette noticed that she was immaculately dressed with her hair and makeup done beautifully and fittingly for the occasion. But even then, Twynette recalls she knew something was amiss. As the party progressed, pulled Twynette into an empty bedroom in order to speak with her privately. Once alone with her friend, Patricia burst into tears. Through heaving sobs, she managed to tell Twynette that she had something which she needed to discuss. But when Twynette pressed her for more details repeatedly, Patricia insisted that the full story was far too complicated to explain that moment. While she did not reveal what was ailing her, Patricia did, however, ask two things of her best friend. First, she begged Twynette to cancel her upcoming personal vacation, to which her best friend confusingly agreed. Patricia tearfully claimed that she would soon finally tell Twynette everything if the two of them could just go away together for a few days. She then chillingly asked Toyne for another favor. She asked that Toyne, quote, take care of her kids no matter what. On the morning of Tuesday, February 13, 2001, Jim left for work at his usual departure time of 6:30 a.m. At 8:15, Christine and Michael left for school. Shortly after, Twynette called Patricia to discuss her emotional breakdown the night before. Shockingly, Twynette recalls Patricia brushing off the situation completely, instead redirecting the telephone conversation to the topic of a gag gif that she intended to buy Jim for Valentine's Day, which was to occur the next day. The present she discussed buying Jim was that of a singing monkey in a cage similar to one that Twynette had bought for her own husband. Shockingly to Twynette, Patricia gave no explanation for the events of the previous night nor space in the conversation to even broach the subject. Twynette remembers thinking to herself that Patricia sounded tired and seemed in a hurry to get off of the phone. Immediately after hanging up with Twynette, Patricia reportedly stormed downstairs to confront her sister-in-law Donna. Her anger stemmed from the danger that was brought about by the cigarette-burn bedspread. This confrontation, her husband, Jim, would later remark was extraordinarily out of character for Patricia. Jim recalls being told by his sister that Patricia acted irate and screamed, quote, like a raving maniac. All of this occurred in the mere 20 minutes after the children left for school. At 8:38 a.m., Patricia left her home and walked to Bixby Elementary School, where she volunteered as a librarian. Bixby Elementary was located on the corner of Fisher and Chestnut Avenues, less than 2 blocks away from the family home and an easy walk. Patricia spent roughly 2 hours at the library that day, spending her time shelving books and assisting at the checkout counter. At some point after Patricia left for the library, a local security company got a report of a security alarm going off at the Viola home. At first, they tried to contact Patricia, but they were unable to reach her. Those close to her say that while Patricia did have a cell phone, she rarely turned it on. The security company then tried to contact Jim, who was unreachable due to his being at work. The alarm company then called Patricia's mother, who answered the call and promptly called the Viola home to check on her daughter. Finding no answer to her phone call, Patricia's mom left officers from the station performed a visual check of the exterior of the home by walking the perimeter of the property and checking in the windows. Ultimately, they determined that nothing looked abnormal and deduced that the front door probably did not close fully when Patricia left. Such a situation would have triggered the alarm and had happened in the past, so the scenario was not out of the ordinary for the quiet town. Between 11:35 and 11:40 a.m. Patricia left her volunteer position at the elementary school and began her walk home. On her short trip, Patricia was witnessed by a crossing guard on Palisade Avenue. She also waved at a passing mailman. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Patricia arrived home to the answering machine blinking. Reports say that she listened to the message from her mother and returned the call. During this telephone conversation, Patricia assured her mother that everything was fine at the home, and that she was aware of the alarm situation. Her mom recalls that the rest of the conversation was normal. This would be the last time that anyone on record ever spoke with Patricia Viola. At some point between 1:11 p.m. and 4:00 p.m., Patricia, by unknown means and for unknown reasons, left her home again. She had no mode of transportation and had not told anybody. Not her husband, her mother, her best friend, Twynette, nor anyone at the library about any plans to go anywhere that day. According to a reading of the alarm control panel, Patricia performed a reset of the home's security system at 1:11 p.m. likely. This was her rearming the alarm system on her way out of the home. As the alarm had been triggered that morning, a reset of the system was required in order to rearm the security capabilities. As such, many assumed that the mother of two left the home sometime between the reset at 1:11 p.m. and when Jim returned home from work, which was at 4:30 p.m. Nobody knows if Patricia left voluntarily or if she was forced to leave. At 4:30 p.m., Jim returned home to find that the alarm had been reset and was beeping at his entry. Upon entering the house, he noticed that Patricia was nowhere to be found. As the family only set the alarm system before going to bed or prior to leaving the house, Jim deduced that his wife was not home. But he did not become concerned until he saw that was left behind. Although Patricia's coat was missing, her purse, keys, cell phone, ID, and epilepsy medicine was still at home. The fact that Patricia failed to bring her anti-seizure medication was the most concerning to those closest to her, as she was meticulous about taking and carrying her medication. She required the medicine twice a day in order to stave off future seizures, which could further restrict her driving capabilities. Because of the architecture of the back door, the Viola family had to use a key to lock it. This key was always left inserted into the deadbolt. Strangely, when he got home, Jim found the key lying on the kitchen table, which was out of place. Confident that Patricia could have only departed the home on foot, Jim called friends and family, while also consulting bus schedules to try and locate his wife. With no luck and having exhausted his options, at 11:58, Jim, now frantic, called police to report Patricia missing. Captain James Sepp of the Bogota Police Department took his complaint, and over the following days, local police conducted door-to-door searches to speak with neighbors, consulted taxi logs from all the car services in town, and stopped buses to be searched along the main routes. While the community response was robust, it was all to no avail. The Bogota Police Department also consulted with Port Authority police to inspect flight manifests from nearby airports. They also checked that no jumping attempts had been reported at the George Washington Bridge that day. The Viola family, alongside concerned neighbors and friends, papered the area with missing person flyers. 3 days after Patricia's disappearance, investigators brought in police dogs to search the ground while also conducting aerial searches. Law enforcement kept in touch with area hospitals as well. However, no Jane Does nor Patricia Violas were ever checked in. Nothing, no evidence, no trace of Patricia's whereabouts or even her mere presence turned up in the ensuing days. Each day that progressed with no news caused Patricia's family to fear that the worst had happened. 2 weeks after Patricia went missing, frustrated at the stagnation of the investigation, Jim and Twynette intensified their own search for Patricia. Twynette spoke to every drugstore and corner shop within walking distance from the Viola home. The pair noted that the singing monkey gift that Patricia had mentioned wanting to buy for Jim was in stock at a Rite Aid pharmacy nearby. Twynette showed the store clerk a picture of Patricia, and the worker did recall seeing Patricia in the store on the day she went missing. However, he said that he had no idea where or in which direction she went after leaving the store. Jim focused his search on local hospitals, as well as his theory at the time was that Patricia may have had another epileptic seizure, of which amnesia could be a possible side effect. But just as police had canvassed and come up with no leads, so too did Patricia's husband. Jim himself was investigated as the husband or romantic partner is statistically the most likely to have committed violence against the missing woman. But he was ruled out by investigators. He first drew suspicion when it was discovered that he had taken the afternoon off of work the day that his wife went missing, but his alibi of being out shopping for Valentine's Day gifts for his wife checked out. He also passed a polygraph exam and has been fully cooperative with the investigation. Jim has continued to keep Patricia's case alive through legislation, media coverage, online discussions, and posters. Some close to the case wondered if there was more to the conflict that Patricia had had with Donna, Patricia's sister-in-law. It was agreed by all that her confrontation and subsequent harsh words were extremely out of character. Some suggested that possibly Donna had tripped the alarm in order to draw Patricia home early, and some also wonder where she was the day Patricia went missing and whether or not she was in the house when Patricia returned home from the library. Those close to the case say that it is odd Donna has not participated in any of the interviews or TV specials related to the case. 1 month after Patricia's disappearance, investigators received a tip from someone who said he saw the woman in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania while stopped at a red light. The Viola family did have a timeshare in nearby Shawnee, Pennsylvania. But although there was hope that the sighting would prove legitimate, nothing ever came of this, and it is unclear if the witness ever saw Patricia or merely a woman who looked similar to her. 1 year after Patricia mysteriously vanished, a man called the Bogota Police Department and claimed that Patricia was in fact dead. He also claimed responsibility for the killing. He said to investigators on the phone, quote, "I killed the old girl." But soon, the police were able to rule this out as a false confession, as the caller had also claimed to have Patricia's driver's license with him, which she had most certainly left behind when she vanished. Further investigation by police into this matter eventually proved this man's confession a hoax. Then, on the stifling hot summer day of July 27, 2002, a left foot, shoe and sock were discovered washed up on the 123rd Street stretch of Rockaway Beach in Queens, New York. This was roughly 45 miles away from the Viola's home in New Jersey. Rockaway Beach runs roughly 5.5 miles across the Atlantic Ocean with projected currents, making it so Patricia's origination was undetermined. Police did conduct additional searches on foot and by helicopter, but no additional remains nor clues ever surfaced. DNA samples were along with the remains in 2005 to be tested. In 2009, New York sent the DNA sample to the Combined DNA Index System lab in West Texas. In 2008, New Jersey finally adopted Patricia's law after tireless efforts by her husband, Jim, to get laws concerning missing people passed. This law was to supplement Title 52 of the revised statutes, which develops the best practices protocol for all law enforcement agencies to follow when addressing reports of missing persons or unidentified deceased human remains. The new law forced officers to begin to investigate missing persons reports immediately, and required that DNA be secured from victims' family and cross-checked in national databases for cases open longer than 30 days. By 2010, requirements to cross-check DNA under Patricia's law were securely in place. On September 12, 2012, poignantly, the first missing person whose remains were officially identified through the adoption of this new law was Patricia Viola herself. Her remains were identified by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office. No other artifacts have ever been recovered in connection to her case. With only 1 foot to go on, no cause of death could ever be determined. Investigators continued to suspect foul play and asked the public for any help or information. On February 25, 2013, Patricia Viola was buried in Hackensack Cemetery in New Jersey. If Patricia had or was in the middle of another epileptic seizure, it could have explained her erratic behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance. Due to experiencing such an event, it was possible that she had left her home for unknown reasons and then tried to seek medical attention for an attack that happened en route. Or perhaps her exit was initially for medical services themselves. As with neurological side effects, she may have not been in a state to contact anybody or indicate her whereabouts. Some wonder if perhaps Patricia had a seizure on her way back home from Rite Aid and then disappeared somewhere along her route. In a morbid and odd connection to another murder case, just 5 years before Patricia went missing in October of 1997. A triple homicide occurred in the house directly across the street from the Viola home. The incident had been a robbery homicide which targeted a diamond dealer in the house. Besides the diamond dealer, 2 others were murdered as well. 4 men were eventually arrested for the crime, and their trial was underway at the time of Patricia's disappearance. According to available reports and information, Patricia was not a witness to that crime and had no official ties to it. Still, some theorize that she was potentially kidnapped or killed either because someone believed her to be a witness or because of a case of mistaken identity targeting an actual witness in the area. Others wonder about the curious incident with the alarm system going off. It's been theorized that someone may have been waiting in the Viola house for Patricia to return. One theory suggests that Patricia's return home may have been interrupted by a burglar or another intruder, who then attacked or forced her to leave against her will. This possibility adds to the mystery of her disappearance, and despite ongoing efforts, her case remains open and unsolved. Authorities have classified her case as a homicide investigation, and a $10,000 reward has been offered for anyone who comes forward with valuable information that could help solve her death. Moving on to the next case.